A Natufian man, sample, is it I0861, 2.02%, and match. So, sample is from a young person who lived between 12,000 and 9,700 BCE, or roughly 13,000 years ago, and died before the age of 30. The remains were uncovered in the Raqefet Cave, located in a southern extension of Mount Carmel, Israel. Samples material in the haplogroup E1B1B1 and L336 in brackets E1B1B connects it to a long prehistoric sequence spanning the Middle Paleolithic through to the Neolithic periods. The first excavation was led by Noy and Higgs, 1970 to 72, and the most recent was led by Nadel and Lengiel, 2004-2011. The first chamber was used extensively by the Natufians, who left 100 bedrock mortars, cup marks, and cupules on the terrace. Some of the mortars are among the largest ever recorded for Natufian sites, and one of the deepest has a grid-like pattern incised inside the shaft. The petrous skull bones analysed for ancient DNA were found in Raqefet, I don't know how to say it, cave, in single or double primary burials of skeletons lying on their backs or on their sides in flexed positions. These are part of a cluster of Natufian graves created within a short time span in a dedicated area of the first chamber of the cave. So this sample refers to the sequenced ancient DNA of a prehistoric Natufian man who was buried approximately 12,000 BCE during the Epipaleolithic era. His remains were discovered in that cave located in modern-day Israel. His remains were excavated from the cave in Mount Carmel, a core site for studying the sedentary hunter-gatherers of the Natufian culture. A temporal horizon, he lived roughly 14,000 years ago, a critical transition period just prior to the birth of agricultural societies. His genetic profile, according to Explore Your DNA's database profile, his genetic breakdown is predominantly 92.8% Natufian core ancestry, paired with trace elements of Caucasus hunter-gatherer / Iranian Neolithic 4.8%, Western hunter-gatherer 0.8%, and East Asian 0.8%, and Sub-Saharan Africa 0.8% lineages. Scientific impact. The successful sequencing of genomes from the Raqefet Cave individuals, including I0861, proved that Natufians carried high amounts of distinct lineage known as Basal Eurasian. This settled all debates by demonstrating that they were a localized, foundational Levantine population rather than a group originating from recent sub-Saharan migrations. So I asked, how does the J1C3 mtDNA connect with this sample? Because that's the only one I've got, mother line. If it doesn't connect with this, then it must be my father line. So the direct connection between mtDNA haplogroup J1C3 and the Natufian sample is an evolutionary and ancestral relationship rather than a direct match. Sample I0861 explicitly belongs to mtDNA haplogroup J2A2, making J1C3 a cousin lineage that shares a deep prehistoric maternal ancestor. So the common maternal ancestor, haplogroup J, both the Natufian man's lineage, J2, and J1C3 belong to the overarching maternal haplogroup J, which mutated from the root JT branch approximately 45,000 years ago in West Asia. Soon after its inception, haplogroup J split into two major daughter groups, J1 and J2. So J1 eventually gave rise to J1C3 and J2 gave rise to J2A2. and that's what he carried. So it's like a cousin thing. And I'm sure that was the same with King Richard. His was a J2. Chronological timeline imbalance. Sample I0861 lived long before the specific J1C3 lineage even existed. 12,000 BC sample is buried in Raqefet Cave. At this point in time, the broader parent branch J1C was just beginning to emerge among Epipaleolithic hunter-gatherers. 5250 BCE, the specific mutation that defines J1C3 first appears in a single woman. This means J1C3 developed roughly 7,000 years after the Natufian man died. Though separate branches, both lines are heavily tied to the same region and history. While sample I0861 represents the older semi-sedentary hunter-gatherer layer of the Levant, the broader J1 and J1C lineages became highly successful among the immediate descendants of these Levantine populations. When early Middle Eastern groups transitioned into farming, both J1 and J2 lineages exploded in population, spreading agricultural practices into southern Europe, North Africa, and the Mediterranean. So what did life look like for Natufian man? In ancient times, it was a unique mix apparently, of hunting, gathering, and permanent village living. They lived roughly 15,000 to 11,500 years ago in the Levant region. Unlike older nomadic tribes, they did not move with the seasons. Instead, they built the world's first settled communities before farming ever existed. Their daily routine: morning hunts, men tracked gazelles, wild boars and birds using bows, arrows and spears. Landscape management: they harvested vast fields of wild wheat and barley using flint-bladed bone sickles. Food processing: they spent hours crushing grain into flour using heavy stone mortars and pestles. They baked the world's first flatbreads and brewed primitive beer from wild starches for feasts. Their home and village: circular huts, semi-subterranean stone houses with wooden pillars and brush roofs. Storage pits: villages featured built-in underground stone bins to protect wild grain harvests from pests. They kept domestic dogs, sometimes burying puppies alongside family members in their homes. So pets must have been important to them as well, do you think? We've got a pet, we've buried it with the family. Their dress and appearance: shell jewellery. Men wore elaborate headdresses and necklaces made from dentalium seashells and deer teeth. They used body art and occasional tooth extraction to show tribal rank or rites of passage. Skeletal remains show they were physically strong and healthy due to a diverse, rich diet. Because the I0861 sample, it's used as its reference ID, primarily in population genetics papers such as the landmark Lazaridis et al. 2016 study. The broad excavation details of his specific grave are catalogued alongside the wider Raqefet Cave assemblage, rather than uniquely lavish shaman-style graves such as the famous tortoiseshell woman of Hilazon Tachet Cave. The individuals in Raqefet Cave were part of a communal, highly ritualized Natufian cemetery. The items and archaeological findings associated directly with the Raqefet Cave burials include plant-derived red dyes and pigments, early chemical dyes. Raqefet Cave is highly significant for providing evidence of early complex organic chemistry. Archaeologists found that beads and personal ornaments buried with individuals were stained with non-mineral red plant/animal dyes, unlike the typical mineral-based red ochre, making it one of the earliest instances of sophisticated organic dye use. Bedding of aromatic flowers and herbs. Floral burials. Many of the graves in Raqefet Cave, including the strata associated with I0861 revealed that the deceased were intentionally laid to rest on thick linings of fresh flowers and green plants. Impressed moles in the clay floors verified the use of an aromatic mints, sages, and Judean sage, showing deep mortuary care and scent management during funerals. Personal adornments and jewellery, shell and bone beads, typical of Natufian culture. Burials at the site were accompanied by personal ornaments made of dentalium shells. These are marine mollusk tubes traded from the coast, and perforated animal bones. Animal teeth, pierced teeth from local game such as gazelle or fox teeth, which were strung together as necklaces, bracelets, or sewn directly onto burial garments or shrouds. Ground stone and flint tools, microliths, the grave fillings and surrounding residential layers yielded a rich toolkit of flint lunates, small crescent-shaped stones used as projectile points for hunting arrows or spears. Bedrock mortars and stone pipes. Raqefet Cave is famous for deep conical mortars carved directly into the cave bedrock right next to or inside burial areas, which were used to grind wild grains, acorns, or tubers for communal funeral feasts. The 13,000-year-old beer recipe. The residues reveal that the Natufians didn't use one crop. They utilised a sophisticated blend across 7 different plant families, including wild wheat, barley, oats, legumes, and flax. The evidence points to a strict 3-stage process. Malting, soaking wild barley or wheat in water to trigger germination, activating the sugars, and then draining and drying it. Mashing, pounding and crushing the malted grain, mixing it with water and heating it inside the bedrock mortars for several hours. Fermentation, allowing the cooked mash to sit with wild environmental yeasts for 1 or more days. It says, note, this prehistoric drink was far from a modern clear lager. It would have had a low alcohol content and a thick porridge-like or gruel-like consistency, filled with unrefined grain debris. Doesn't sound appealing. Spiritual and funerary context. Brewed for the dead. Because these mortars were carved right next to a communal burial pits like that of Natufian man I0861, the beer was clearly not a casual beverage. Instead, it was brewed as part of an elaborate ritualistic funerary feasts to honour deceased ancestors, serving as a powerful social tool to bond semi-nomadic hunter-gatherers during times of mourning. Wow. So, global timeline, how it fits together. The Raqefet Cave finding completely recharted the global timeline of ancient alcohol production. So next in this period of time, the Pleistocene, is the origin of modern Moroccan. Sample TAF, is that 009? That's the next on my agenda. Find out more. It's fascinating.